I'm not sure that there's a conflict. Well, this record is all about contrast, very very extreme contrast sometimes, and paradoxes, which to me is what life is full of. You know, it's paradoxes. And when you look at the seven deadly sins, I think you find both light and dark. So when you talk about the joys of life, I think any of these things can actually bring us joy, but they can also send us to, I mean, they can send us to either heaven or hell, basically, which is why the title. I don't know. I didn't really think about it until now, and now I realize what it is. I think I'm just very interested in duality and light and dark and paradoxes. And this record is all about that, so I think suddenly it becomes obvious to me, you know, what that means. But I didn't know that before. I'm definitely a sinner, yeah. I have all seven. I think that we all do, actually. I mean, I think that these are all common human things, and I have all seven inside me. I mean, there's some that I understand more than others. You know, greed is difficult for me. Lust is pretty easy. I think it is for most people, you know. So I think we all have a slightly different mix, but we all have all of them, I think. A long time ago when I made my first record, people started calling me the angry young man, and I thought this was incredibly funny because I had this idea of an angry young man, this character, sort of like a cartoon character, who is just angry all the time. So no matter what he does, he's just furious. You know, he's like drinking a Coke and he's just like furious at this Coke. He brushes his teeth like, in fury, you know. And I thought this was a very funny idea. So anyway, many years later, I wrote this piece on this record about anger, and I recreated this character. He's the angry young man. He's angry at absolutely everything. And I find him a very funny figure. But, of course, at the same time, he's kind of frightening, too. You know, because you can laugh at him, but then you never know when, I mean, just all of a sudden he might, you know, smash this bottle and stick it in your face, you know, so then it's not so funny anymore. So this is the character that I created in this song, and I think that everyone can see something of themselves in all of these pieces. It's part of the piece on anger, and I just wanted to create chaos, you know. I mean, sometimes New York feels like an angry city. If you're feeling in a certain kind of mood, you know, it can feel just too much. It feels like the cars are angry, you know, the buildings are angry. And so I wanted to get that feeling by recording a piece of the piece right in the middle of Times Square, amongst all that noise. And this guy is a street musician that, you know, plays on the street. So it was almost like that he's just there by accident, almost. But he's providing a rhythm that connects it to the other parts of the song. Excess, the idea of excess. And I thought that this was a way to have some fun musically by having an excess of notes. So I was thinking, you know, in the film Amadeus, the scene where the emperor or the archduke or whoever he is says to Mozart, "Too many notes, my dear Mozart, too many notes," which I thought was quite funny. But in this piece, actually, it has too many notes. I mean, it starts with a fugue and piling more and more notes on top of each other until you just want to scream. Like most of the other things on the album, it's I think quite funny and sort of frightening at the same time, because I just imagine these guys stuffing everything they can into their mouths. It's really, I said it in the scene, it's sort of like the last pub before you get to hell, you know, and everyone is just stuffing themselves with everything, and meanwhile outside there's torrential rain is pouring down, and there's fire and brimstone, and they're all going to hell, they're all damned, but they're just like trying not to think about it, and they're just stuffing food and drink in their faces. So I think it's a sort of funny picture and also kind of frightening at the same time. Pride? I wouldn't call that pride. But again, I think that they all have light and dark sides, and the light side of pride is just a healthy self-respect. You know, and the dark side is where it just goes too far, and you just think that you're more important than everyone or anything else in the world. And when you get to that place, then anything can happen, which is why pride is the worst of all sins. I found that that order was one of the things that gave me a structure to work with. So pride is the last one, it's the last and worst. And I was interested in this idea of a archetypal character from Greek mythology who would represent pride. Actually, the Greeks would have used the word hubris, basically the same thing. And I decided to take this character from 2,500 years ago or something and bring him up to date. So he's a modern Daedalus. And he says terrible things, cliches like, call me, let's do lunch, you know. But he's just completely self-obsessed, you know, as the song gradually builds. In the beginning, he just sounds like he's quite confident, and it's sort of okay. But then as it goes along, he's getting more and more crazy, and his ego is just getting so huge. In the end, he says that he's God. And as he goes through this, the music becomes more and more twisted and distorted and dissonant. So that was the basic idea. This is one of the pieces where I had a sort of vision of the whole thing before I started writing it, which doesn't always happen, but in this case it did. So I was very nervous about it because I didn't know if I was able to live up to my own ambition, you know. But I think it worked out pretty good. I'm not going to try to come across with false modesty, you know. It's possible that no one else in the whole world will like it, so at least I can like it. So when people say, how do you feel about your new album? I say, you know what, I think it's fucking great. And I think that that's where it has to start, you know. I finished the record and then tried to find a record company to work with who understood it and who was enthusiastic about it. And I'm actually quite surprised too that it turns out to be a classical label. I mean, I didn't expect that at all. But I kind of like it actually, because with the pop label, I was so tired of hearing, oh, you know, we know your music's good, but we don't know how to market it. We can't get it on the radio. There's no single. We can't get on MTV. It's difficult. It's a problem. You know, it's so negative. I was so sick of hearing that. So I just wanted to work with a record company that was going to be more positive, and it just turned out to be Sony Classical. And obviously, I'm not making classical music, but they're also working with other artists who are not obviously classical either. It's just contemporary music that doesn't really fit in the pop conventions. So the definition of what a classical record label can release, I think, is, you know, broadening. Obviously, because they've signed me. So I think this is a very interesting development. It can be anything from sheer joy to complete misery to panic, just fascination, and sometimes a really spooky feeling, like it's coming from somewhere else, when it really starts to go right. I think when you compose, or if you write a book or whatever you do, you're always trying to find a road. It's like trying to find a road to go on, and you always go down dead ends a lot, but then you find a road that goes forward. And once you get on it, you have a feeling like it starts to write itself, and it's like it's just coming from somewhere else, and that's the best feeling. And it sounds very mystical, but you know, I don't know how else to describe it. It is quite mysterious, but that's when it really feels good. I don't know, I hadn't really thought about that. Usually there's some kind of live performance, so a lot of the nervous energy gets channeled into that, which, you know, it's better than going out looking for a fight or, you know, throwing bricks through windows or something. I wrote the piece with her voice in mind. I wanted her to play a part, play a character. You know, they're all different characters to me, and so it was sort of like casting, casting a movie or something. And she was the person that I wanted to play that part. And we worked together before. I've known her for a long time, and there's really no one else that sounds like her, So that was the voice that I had in my mind. They're all musical decisions, It's all about the right color, the right character. It's not any other kind of more calculated decision. Well, at first I was going to sing that one myself, but quite deep, and I can sing it, but it doesn't sound. I mean, when I started singing it, I felt like I can do this, but it's not really my best singing, So I should maybe use someone with a really deep voice. So I immediately thought of him. And it turned out that he was a big fan of mine. And he was very enthusiastic about doing it, which is great. I mean, actually, all of these people were very generous and very enthusiastic and really contributed a lot to the project. And it's really incredibly flattering to me, because I didn't really have any expectations when I started approaching these people. I mean, for all I know, they were going to say, but I mean, they all seem to be really into it. So I'm really happy about that, and it made it very, very enjoyable project to do. I feel that way too. It's a sort of strange, unnatural environment. To me, a natural environment for music is when musicians performing and people actually there listening, so there's a communication. That's always the best thing, I think. But sometimes you can do things in the studio that you couldn't do live. I mean, like, for instance, in this case, I was able to put together, 6 different singers, and we're not going to be able to, I'm not going to go out on tour with, Dawn Upshaw, Suzanne Vega, Brad Roberts, all these people. So sometimes you have to look at it as a different thing. Yeah, it's harder because you're not getting any feedback. When you perform live, the audience gives you some energy, but you don't have that in the studio. So the way that I cope with that is to try to spend as little time as possible in the studio, because I work pretty quickly, and also I can't work. I mean, people work all night, they work for 12, 15, 18 hours at a time. I usually don't work for more than about 6 hours. And especially for mixing, I just come in half an hour, go out again, come back again. The important thing to me for recording is to try to be as objective as possible, which is very difficult. So you have to make strategies to stay objective. And I think the biggest one is to spend as little time as possible in the studio. That's right, yes, I'm the evil dictator, and they're all my slaves. I mean, you have to understand that different people work in different ways. There are people who work collaboratively, and there are composers, and I'm a composer, and I have a very clear idea in my head of what I want the music to sound like. So that's the nature of what I do is not collaborative. But I mean, I like to do other things sometimes that are collaborative, like writing music for movies, for instance. It's just it's a different thing. Actually, I'd like to do more collaborative things. I'd like to do more things where I play the piano on someone else's record or things like that, But when it's my own record, I want it to be my own record because whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but I want it to be at least unique, if possible. So I think the important thing is just that it's really my record. Well, I don't think I do anything that's really very different to what anyone else does. But, this is a important point, perhaps, because sloth is not just laziness or just taking it easy. I mean, sometimes that's the best thing you can do, but sloth is much more about an attitude of what's the point of anything, why bother, who cares, it's not my problem, it's not worth it, and it's really a kind of negativity that doesn't go anywhere, and it's when you just don't make any effort at all. And there's actually a lot of sloth around today, I think. I see it all the time because I see this kind of very cool attitude that a lot of people have, and this way of being sort of detached and ironic and cool, and it's sort of not fashionable to really care about anything or be passionate about anything. And I think that's connected with the sin of sloth. Because if you're just cool and ironic about everything, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just something that spirals in on itself, and it ends in despair ultimately. And so sloth is a really bad one, I think, or at least it's much worse than people generally think. It's not a factor at all. I mean, I think it was years ago. It was probably an inspiration in the early '80s, but now I'm just sort of used to it, and I still like it for the most part. I think it's a very interesting place, but I don't know if it really influences what I write. I think it probably wouldn't make much difference where I was writing, actually. But the great thing about New York is so many good musicians and, studios, and it's a good place for me to work. Sometimes I hear things I like, and it could be from anywhere. But I think that pop music in Britain has been more interesting recently than it was for quite a long time before. I think there's some pretty good things recently. But I'm not an expert, I don't listen to a lot of music. And sometimes it takes me a while to catch up with things because I don't listen to music all day like I used to years ago. So I don't know, I can't speak from an expert point of view. I didn't set out to preach a sermon. I latched onto this theme of the seven deadly sins because I wanted something to give me a structure and to give me a musical structure, really. I didn't choose it because I wanted to make a philosophical statement or a religious statement or anything like that. And I certainly didn't have any intention to put across a message. If there's a message, then maybe it's something like the fact that all of these things are basic human urges that we all have, and that they can be either light or dark. And it's just a matter of awareness. So the extremes of black and white never really work. And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time bouncing from one extreme to the other, and that's why we're dissatisfied, because we don't find the right balance. I think that becomes more important as you get older and you think about that more. Like when you're younger, you tend to think something is either black or white. I think when you get older, you realize that it quite often is both. And sometimes that's very difficult to deal with. But when you do deal with it, you feel a lot better. Things make more sense. So I think there's a lot of that going on in this project, whether people see it or not. And it doesn't matter really if they don't, it's not, I didn't really do it as a message. The music is really the most important thing anyway.